Thank you all for joining us. This is our first after school special of 2022, I think. Is that right, Jen? Yeah, so it's been a while since we've done an after school one. Definitely a different vibe than the morning ones. So we just got an hour, so we will do our best to make it fast-paced and engaging and fit in all of the strategies and ideas and activities that we want to share with you. So we're focusing in on how we can use reading workshop in our primary classrooms. All right, and so our goals and our focus for this afternoon, we're going to be exploring how we can use a reading workshop framework that starts with a mini lesson. So front loading the teacher modeling and demonstration of what good readers think and do when they're reading and how they interact with texts through conversation and reading and writing experiences. And Jen will guide us through a mini lesson demo. And then what we'll do is we'll explore how when you shift into some different types of independent practice for our students. So independent doesn't mean they're necessarily all by themselves, but it's independent from teacher direction. And so there may be small groups, there may be partners, kids may be reading by themselves or with a buddy, and we may be circulating and working with small groups, doing another mid-teaching moment or a guided reading session, or giving some students some additional support. So that practice time is the bulk of the reading workshop, and it's meant to be flexible and differentiated and responsive to what the students are needing based on the skill or strategy that we just taught in our mini lesson. And as we go through what the developmental stages of reading are, so depending on what you're teaching this year, you may be supporting a lot of kids if you're doing K, especially emergent. And what we see here, you see that very first bullet. A lot of it is what they're doing and they're able to do, and it's developmentally appropriate. They're pretending and imitating as they practice reading behaviors that we see. And that's why part of why the modeling and demonstrations and talking about what good readers do is so important to be doing over and over and again with them. And then as they shift developmentally and build up some skills, they shift into that early reader stage. You see here, there's quite a few more bullets. It's a lot about concepts of print, having that sense of sounds and letter matching, and that letters can be grouped into words, how they make sounds. They're building up some high frequency words. Really, I think it's that third to last bullet from the bottom. They're developing some decoding and problem solving skills. And so that's the type of stuff that we will be modeling and doing mini lessons for in a really focused, intentional way, as they are still relying on pictures, initial consonants, and other cues to help them navigate the books that they're reading. And then as they move on the continuum into fluent readers, you see it just obviously gets more complex. They're getting those stronger decoding skills, applying more complex comprehension strategies. They have a bigger bank of sight words and a bigger set of tools in their reading toolkit to help move them along. So we can provide the scaffolding and the supports in place to help move them along the continuum. And part of that is knowing where they are at. So just because we have kindergarten doesn't mean everyone's emergent. And just if you're teaching grade 3, it doesn't mean that everyone is fluent. We know that very well. There's a wide range of abilities in all of our classrooms, no matter what the grade is. And so knowing what our students know, what they're able to do, is a really good assessment piece for us to know where to start supporting them with next steps. And the research on effective reading instruction, this is now looking at key principles and what we're doing in our day-to-day routines, at our literacy block and beyond. But students need to read continuous text. So word walls, sight words, flashcards, those things are great for building up individual skills and targeting specific phonemic phonological awareness skills and sort of that word work variety. But we need to make sure that there is meaning and intention and that they're reading continuous text as well. What you'll also see here, we've bolded some of the words, so some of that might jump out at you. Variety of high quality texts, a large quantity of text, so quality and quantity. What they're doing is building up a reading process, which is one of the most complex things humans can do. And we're getting them to start doing it at 5 and 6. So it's really quite incredible. We want to make sure that they understand and get chances to read different texts for different purposes. So you think about genre and different forms, and then hearing many texts read aloud. And again, that's us doing the demonstrations and the modeling of what good reading looks and sounds like. You think about intonation and phrasing and tone and voice, using dialogue, speech bubbles, all of those different things that we do so that our students can start to have something to aim towards. So we're giving them different support at different times. We're not so fixated on levels. Levels describe books. They don't describe readers. They don't describe students. And we want to give them the opportunity and model that reading for authentic purposes, really, it brings us all joy, I think. Probably all of us teaching find that as well. We're readers. And so we're allowing them to see themselves as readers, and they have tastes and preferences for different types of books and things that they like to read. So we know that, we can support it, we can honor and acknowledge and nurture that in our students through the school year. So reflecting back on your own time when you were a younger reader, think about high school or elementary school. And I'll give you some music as you think about this and enter what you'd like to share in the chat box. When did you really enjoy reading? And it could be outside of school, but just think about sort of the phases through your childhood into your teenage years. When did you enjoy reading? Was there ever a time where you detested it? And what were the conditions that made it so good or so bad? I think we may see some common trends here. Anyways, yeah, so that's an opportunity for us to think about, are we giving our students the opportunity to have those conditions for them to really enjoy reading? And something that we can reflect on, even just the choice piece. We're obviously not going to let them choose what they read all the time, every time, but there are lots of opportunities in the day, even for silent, independent reading, choice reading, buddy reading. Let them pick what they want. So that links to this. Think about yourself as a reader, and for us now. So again, we talked about that a lot. That came up in the comments. Choice, reading for a variety of purposes, having the opportunity to read for long periods of time, responding through reflection, conversation, collaboration, and sharing our thinking and our insights with others. I think connecting with someone over what we're reading. Hey, you know what? I just read something. It was really fascinating. I didn't know. Can I tell you about it? It can launch really wonderful discussions. We can model that for our students as well, and they can start to do it too. So yeah, thinking about how we can set our students up with these opportunities. And one thing we've got, this is on our website. This is just a screenshot of part of our reading interest survey. We do also have a writing interest survey. This is a 2-pager, but double-sided. You could send it home with your students. They could have a conversation with their parents. The parents could help them complete it if they're younger. It could be something you did in small groups or with a buddy class, depending on COVID protocols and safety and all of that. But again, just getting that information about what our students are interested in and using that to build on, to help them have those joyful opportunities to really dig into reading for authentic, joyful, and engaging purposes beyond the learning to read piece. So if I'm learning to read and I'm building up my skills and my sight word vocabulary, and I'm super into horses, if I've got a horse book to do that, my buy-in and my motivation, my engagement is going to be high.
So now that we are thinking about our students and their interests, and we've kind of had an idea of effective reading practices that Lisa went through here, we're going to take a look at what this can look like in our classroom. So this is a way that we can look at scaffolded support for reading. So providing a lot of opportunity for all of those effective practices that Lisa shared. And also really looking at this as a way to support our students with different experiences, but make sure that we're leading them towards a gradual release of responsibility so that they can have explicit instruction, but then also have lots of time to practice their reading. So one of the ways that we're going to share this today, looking at a framework that can set our students up for success and give them opportunities for all of those different scaffolded supports, is a reading workshop framework. So really what this looks like is a focused mini lesson to begin with that is explicit instruction on something that we know that our students need more work with based on our formative assessments. And then a big chunk of time for students to have that independent practice time where we are, as Lisa mentioned, we could be conferencing with students, we could be working with small groups, our students could be reading on their own or buddy reading, lots of different ways that our students can work within this framework, but it allows that scaffolded support. And then coming back together at the end of the time, the reading workshop time, to share and celebrate ourselves as readers. So giving them that time to see themselves as readers and really flourish. And there's a brief graphic about what that could look like in your classroom. And the main part of that Lisa already mentioned is that independent time is not them working necessarily on their own, but just not teacher-directed time. So the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project really set up this framework in a way that focused on comprehension and foundational skills. So really emphasizing those experiences that are going to give our students lots of time to practice comprehension and foundational skills within authentic reading. And what we mean by comprehension is really looking at that use and that use of background knowledge, that building of vocabulary knowledge, that reasoning, thinking deeply about text, as well as the foundational skills of word reading. So phonological awareness, decoding, and sight words. And we want to think of them as merging together so that our students understand that they don't just have to read the words on the page, but they have to understand the meaning of what they are reading as well. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a mini lesson format now. And you can see that this is the direct explicit instruction that is generally a whole class, and what this can look like when we have small little bits of information that we can share with our students and connect back to previous learning and forward to forward learning. So we're going to start with a connection. Now for this, I'm going to put you into the role of students so that you can see what this can look like in a classroom, and then we'll briefly talk about it afterwards. All right. Okay, so remember yesterday, we had a very exciting letter from the super secret detective agency. And they were wondering if we were interested in being recruited as word detectives. Now, we talked about this, we talked about pros and cons, and we decided to take on the opportunity together. So we were super excited when a second envelope appeared with our first mission on it. Word detectives are always on the lookout. They notice when there's a problem and they stop to solve it right away. Now, remember, we talked about what that could look like, and we did some modeling and working together on that. And I we did a read aloud with this book here. And your job as word detectives was to listen to see what looked right or what did not look right and what did not sound right, and to put up your hand and stop me so that I knew that we needed to do our job as word detectives in that part. So I'm just going to remind you that on this page here, hard to see because I don't know what I'm reading, there was the word baboon. And you put up your hand to signal for me to stop because it looked so much like balloon. And that's what I said. And you said, that doesn't make sense based on our story. So we went right to work and solved that by thinking about what would make sense. Then on this page, I read a raindrop splashes. And again, you put up your hand to stop me. And you mentioned that I needed to look across the whole word to make sure that I was getting the ending correct. So we got to work with our word detective skills, and then you had some time to practice on your own. Okay, so we've done the connection. Now, let's talk about what we're going to teach today. Okay, you will not believe this, but we have another envelope and it is so exciting. We have our second mission and it says, word detectives look closely to get clues. Word detectives make sure to look across the whole word from start to end. So we have our mission. I'm so excited to work with you on this. Okay, now I'm going to stop there with having you enroll as a student, just because I want to make very explicit how wonderful it is when we can use a read aloud during our mini lessons, because this really allows our students to see us problem solve and think deeply about text. It allows our students to, for us to model this and for them to explicitly notice what we are doing. And all the other reasons that Lisa mentioned at the beginning of our workshop today, involving fluency and, building that community and being able to access that text. And I just love this quote from Berkins and Yaris. Read aloud represents the way a student experiences the joy of the dance while simultaneously nurturing the skill needed to be able to do it alone. Beautiful, wonderful. So I'm going to introduce you to a read aloud. Now, generally, what I would do if we were all in the same room or if I was in front of students, I would be doing this read aloud with that strategy in mind that we just learned from our mission, our second mission. Now, because this is just such a beautiful book, what I'm going to do is allow you just to sit back and listen to it. But what I would like you to put into the chat box is, why do you think that I chose this particular book for this particular mission for us to work on? Okay, absolutely. You had so many great ideas in the chat box. Thank you for connecting all of the intentional reasons that I chose this book to share along with that mission for the students. So then as we taught the modeled and taught the strategy, and then we would have the students try it themselves for a couple of minutes with their own books, and then link out to Tomorrow and Beyond with a cool song. So I'm going to ask you, because I am not a very confident singer, you have to unmute yourself and work with me on this one, okay? Please, please, please. We'll just do it for a really short time. Okay, so we have the words there. Ghostbusters is big again, so we can go there, and we'll just do a couple verses. Such a fun way to link out. It's reinforcing the strategies that we've been talking about. It's a fun way, and they're reading the lyrics, depending on the students that you have or memorizing, and you can play that song over and over and over again and keep them engaged. So just a recap of the strategies that we learned from being a word detective: notice the problem, solve it, and look closely from start to end. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
So as we talked about earlier, that bulk of the writing and the reading workshop, is time for students to independently practice. And again, it's independent. It's not teacher directed. So whether they're working in a partnership or a small group or in a guided reading group, they are having that time to practice a really specific focused skill that we just did a mini lesson on. So it's very narrow, it's very intentional, and it's very focused. So for them to make good use of the time, I think we all know management is always an issue, and we need to be proactive with that by being really clear and explicit about our expectations for how they use the time, what they're doing with the reading materials, what they're doing with their bodies and their voices. What are the choices available to them for where they're sitting, who they're reading with, and being really, really strict and tough about when they go outside of the expectations. We've got to get everybody back to the carpet, and we're going to try it again. And we talk about what went wrong, what we need to do differently, and we're going to try it again. So I used to do this in my class with I sort of took a modified, adapted version of the Daily 5. And we were in Daily 5 boot camp until Thanksgiving, basically from the start of the year. And it was slow and painful at times, but it was worth it because they understood the consequences. If they were being silly or off task or whatever, it really did mean they came back to the carpet and we moved. We had to redo everything again. So all the kids that were really excited about reading, they learned that if they got off track, it just delayed their reading. So they quickly learned to follow the expectations so that they could get right to it and dig into the reading, which was wonderful to see. So we want to do that gradual release of responsibility to them over time and be consistent so that they know that we're going to hold them to those high expectations. So in the time when the students are practicing, we are giving them the chance to, and we've set this up in the modeling and the demonstration and our mini lesson with a read aloud like Jen did. Things like we want them to understand and start to be able to preview their own texts. So when they've chosen a book, are they sure this is something they want to read? Can they make some guesses, inferencing, wondering and noticing, making good choices for themselves of books that they'll be interested in, different genres, things they can read, sharing their books and their thinking with others, and then internalizing and making automatic those problem-solving skills, which are the phonological awareness, the word work, all of those pieces of the comprehension. So those foundational skills to boost up their comprehension as they gradually over time start to read more complex, higher level texts. So if you have any other strategies for building independence with your students as readers, feel free to write it into the chat box. We had a timer here for some music, but I think I'm going to just keep going. So share any strategies or routines that work really well for you. My last little stretch here before I pass it over to Jen, we're going to focus in on the benefit of reading conferences and what we can be doing in that practice time. So the bulk of our reading workshop, what we can be doing to circulate, touch base, connect, and conference with students, to get that little bit of formative assessment for where they're at, explore their thinking, be that coach or the guide on the side, and keep them on track to continually develop their reading skills and strategies slowly over time. So conferring with students or having those conferences allows us to see the variety of our students, which we all know it's everywhere, every class, it's a huge variety. We have a researcher hat on, we're learning about our students. We're developing a relationship by having a one-on-one conversation with them where they get our undivided attention, even just for a minute or two. And then we can look at different types of conferences to gather information and give support in a variety of ways, depending on where the student's at and what they need. So if this were a longer workshop, we would be digging into and unpacking all 5 of these different types of reading conferences. So assessment, goal setting, coaching, researching, and complement conferences. But because we just have an hour, we're going to focus in on a couple of them that I think Jen and I both felt are sort of the easiest and most accessible, least intimidating, if conferencing is one of those things that seems intimidating or like a lot of work. So a really key distinction between conferencing and a small group lesson or a guided reading lesson or some instruction is that the spotlight is really on the student. So they're self-reflecting, they're doing the heavy lifting here. They're showing us what they've learned. They're asking support. So part of it is teaching them to ask for support by knowing when they need it. And they are actively practicing strategies as they're engaged with texts. So for us, it's a bit of a different role than we're often used to, being that really active teaching expert mode that we do with the whole class so often. We're able to offer new strategies, support the strategies they're still practicing, give them some feedback, and really act more as a coach or a guide or a compliment giver, which, as we all know, always makes you feel good when someone notices something that you're doing and gives you a compliment. So again, it's a conversation. It's not a pop quiz to check what they know or they don't know. It's a time to give individualized support. So we're not seeing that Braden is struggling with this and we're going to stop and say, okay, everybody stop. Braden is struggling with this, so I bet you all are. I'm going to teach you all something. That's not what it's about. We're just sticking with the student that we're with in that moment, because it probably is just a minute or two, and it's about you and that student. So they're doing the work. We're not doing all the talking. We are guiding and coaching them, not doing modeling. So that is for the whole class in a mini lesson or a reteaching moment with a small group. So the focus is on the reader It's not about being a time to teach the book to the student. So a goal setting conference, we can help the child, ask them, looking at an example of their work or a book that they're reading, have some questions for them. I'll share those on the next slide. We can offer them a strategy to help them start working towards a goal that they want to work towards. So they've chosen their reading goal and we've given them some options to choose from. We can then have them try it just right then and there, read a few sentences to us. We can give them some feedback and be that coach. And then remind them, just like we did with the Ghostbusters song, this is something in your toolkit going forward. You can use this tomorrow. You can set your own goals. You can practice and keep developing as a reader. I don't always need to be teaching you because you are becoming a really great reader. So some of those inquiry questions, what do you notice about your work? Or it could be about your book. Can you think of ways you can improve your reading? What do you find you're struggling with? What do you think might make the biggest difference for you as a reader? What's some new work you're thinking of taking on? Is there a new book or a new series or genre you're interested in? And then also this open-ended, one thing I'm noticing is, and what are your thoughts? So some prompts and giving them some options to choose from. Again, if you have some go-to question for conferring with students that works really well for you or a couple, feel free to share those in the chat box.
So the biggest or the most popular question that I get from primary teachers when I talk about the reading workshop framework is, what do I do with the students who don't know how to read yet? So this comes from a place of a belief that every student is ready for something. So the importance of reading approximations and all of those pre-reading skills that we can work on with students is a beautiful place for a reading workshop. So because it is naturally differentiated, our students are working generally at their ability level, but they're always ready for something. So if Sally today is ready, she showed that she knows how to turn the pages correctly in her book, that's where she is. And that's what we need to celebrate and move forward for her. So we want them to become really confident in their reading as a member of our reading community and really focus on the progress, not perfection. And a huge, huge benefit to this is the importance of oral rehearsal. So our students get a good sense of storybook language. They get to practice reading out loud. They get to notice and wonder about the book that they're reading. And a couple of different ways that we can do that is looking at familiar books. So our students can pick up a book that they're familiar with and use their memory of the story to tell the story over pages. They can focus on making meaning. The oral language development is huge because they're retrieving words and phrases from the memory of the book and using a lot of the picture clues to support their comprehension so they know the format. And there's lots of wonderful ways that they're navigating the book through concepts of print. Now, there's also benefits for reading unfamiliar books, for giving our students the time and opportunity to pick up books that they haven't read before. And what they can do with these books is make a lot of predictions. They can look closely at the illustrations and details in the pages and make lots of wonderings and noticings about text. So it's very empowering for them to have access to familiar and unfamiliar books as emergent readers. So just a quick thing about conferencing with our emergent readers. So we can do so many different things when we're looking at text with our readers that are just learning how to navigate a book. So concepts of print, and Lisa talked about this at the beginning of our workshop today, but there are so many ways that students need to know to navigate a book as a pre-reading skills in their development. So everything from noticing what's the difference between a word and a letter and a sentence, pointing to the first word of a sentence is helping with their directionality, noticing that our sentences start with capitals and end with punctuation. All of those are really, really important ways that we can notice what our students can do and how to nudge them forward. We can also work with Alconin boxes or sound boxes and have our students look at simple CVC words and isolate the sounds by pushing up Unifix cubes or something like that as they're slowly saying the sounds in a word. Now, this is again working with, do they have directionality under control? Can they isolate words and then afterwards blend them together? They are connecting that words have sounds. So many different things that we can do there. We can have our students dictate a sentence to us, and we can write it on a sentence strip and then cut it up and put it in front of them and have them put it back together. So can they put simple sentences back together? And I have to say, I'm super proud of this slide that I just able to figure out how to do that. That was like my proudest moment. But what this does is it teaches our students, again, it solidifies sentences start with capitals, they end with punctuation, they have there's difference between a letter and a word, there's spaces in between our words, and then that words or sentences carry meaning. So many different things that we can do with our students that are pre-reading skills. Okay, so you can probably see that we've been talking a lot about the reciprocity between reading and writing. And that's a really good way to solidify those skills for our students, because with reading and writing, they can be learning the same concept in two different ways. That's just going to help them transfer information better and make those connections in their brain. Like everything like left to right directionality, that there's difference between words, letters, phrases, and sentences. So many different things that are important for our students to know as they are working on learning all of the different, very, very difficult processes of reading that Lisa mentioned at the beginning. And as Jennifer Saravello says, conferring is where the magic happens. It's the heartbeat of the literacy block. It's where you get to know your students and be a researcher. So this is just a quick reminder that we took a look at the scaffolded supports for reading and really looked at a framework that allowed a ton of scaffolding for our students. Okay, and here are the resources that we used to build your workshop today. If there's anything intriguing, check it out. We are so thrilled that you decided to take your own time today to spend the afternoon with us or the hour with us. And if there's anything that you want to contact us about, there's our info.